Welcome, friends. Tonight, we will walk slowly into the ancient sanctuary of Delphi. High on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, the air is cool, the stones are old, and the world feels quiet enough to breathe again. Tonight, you will explore the life of a priestess, a life shaped by ritual, by devotion, and by the steady calm of Apollo's presence. As you settle in, let your breathing soften. Let the noise of the day drift away. There is no rush here, only the slow rhythm of an ancient place, waiting for you. In this story, you'll move through Delphi as someone who belongs to it. You'll wake to soft morning light on marble walls. You'll walk through sacred courtyards with laurel in hand. And you'll feel the quiet responsibility carried by those who served the god. Throughout the night, you will learn her routines. You will understand her boundaries. You will share her moments of stillness and feel the blend of duty and peace that shaped her life. So get comfortable. Breathe gently. Let the valley grow calm around you. Your life as a priestess begins now. The journey begins long before you reach the sanctuary. Long before the first marble column comes into view. You start on a narrow path that winds up the slopes of Mount Parnassus. The air is cool and thin, carrying the scent of pine and the faint smoke of shepherds' fires drifting somewhere below. Pilgrims once walked this same road. Some travelled for days, some for weeks. All of them drawn to Delphi, the place believed to hold the voice of Apollo. As you move forward, imagine the crunch of gravel beneath your sandals, the gentle sweep of mountain wind brushing your cloak, and the quiet sense that the world is lifting you higher with every step. Below you, the valley spreads wide and soft. Olive trees shimmer under the fading light. Terraces carved into the hillside trace the work of generations. Farmers tending their fields while watching the sanctuary glow in the distance. The path narrows as you climb. Stone walls rise at your sides. Water flows somewhere nearby. This is the Castalian Spring. Its waters once used for purification before entering the sacred precinct. Ahead, ancient stones mark the approach, tall, worn by time, standing like silent guides along the mountain road. The world grows quieter as you near the sanctuary. Footsteps echo softly, the wind settles, and a gentle stillness gathers around you, as if the mountain itself is holding its breath. You reach a slow bend in the trail, and then Delphi reveals itself. Terraces rising in careful layers, temples and treasuries shaped from pale stone, and the long sacred way curving upward toward the temple of Apollo. This is where your new life begins, not as a traveller, not as a stranger, but as someone chosen to serve within these walls. Take a steady breath as the last of the day's light fades. The path beneath your feet feels sure. The sanctuary ahead feels calm. The journey has carried you to the threshold. Now, the world of the priestesses begins to open. Your place within Apollo's sanctuary gently coming into view. And with the mountains settling around you, you step quietly into the next part of your life in Delphi. Your life in Delphi begins with an ancient truth. The priestesses who served Apollo were not ordinary women. They belonged to one of the most respected religious institutions in the Greek world, active for nearly 1,000 years. The role of a priestess here, especially the Pythia, was shaped by strict traditions. Early in Greek history, the position was held by a young woman. But after one priestess was abducted by a visitor, the Delphians changed the rule. From then on, the Pythia was required to be older, a woman past childbearing age, respected for her calm nature and her stability within the community. You would have come from a family with good reputation, not necessarily wealthy, but known for integrity, education, and a life that reflected harmony rather than conflict. Some priestesses were widows. Some were lifelong unmarried women. All lived under expectations of purity and discipline. Your preparation began long before you ever set foot in the sanctuary. From childhood, you learned household rituals, how to keep fires steady, how to purify water with laurel leaves, how to recite hymns during festivals. These quiet skills mattered because the sanctuary relied on precision, on steadiness, and on a clear mind. When you were chosen, it was never sudden. Delphi did not select priestesses impulsively. Local elders observed your behavior over years. They watched how you treated strangers at festivals, how you helped during public rites, how you behaved when the community was tense, or when someone needed comfort. Calmness was not just admired, it was required. Once accepted, you entered formal training. Older priestesses taught you the layout of the sanctuary. You learned the position of each treasury, each altar, and each path used by pilgrims. The sanctuary was large, filled with monuments built by city-states from across the Greek world, all left in gratitude for Apollo's guidance. Your tasks began with simple, factual duties: cleaning altars from ash, collecting spring water for purification, maintaining the sacred laurel branches, and preparing barley meal used in offerings. You learned how to observe omens in sacrificial smoke, how to recognize auspicious birds, and how to tell the difference between ordinary. Before Delphi shaped your days, your life began in an ordinary Greek household. Most priestesses came from families rooted in stable communities, people known for fairness, modesty, and quiet respect within the town. Your childhood was simple. You learned to grind grain, prepare wool, and tend the household fire. You memorized hymns sung during festivals, and watched your mother mark thresholds with olive oil during days of protection and cleansing. These small rituals were not grand, but they were foundational. They taught patience, they taught steadiness, and they taught you how the sacred lived in everyday gestures. Families who raised priestesses often encouraged reading and reciting. Some young girls learned to interpret basic omens. Others were taught the genealogies of heroes or the stories of local gods. Nothing formal, just the quiet education that shaped your sense of order and meaning. When the sanctuary chose you, your family understood what it meant. A mixture of pride, a sense of duty, and a soft grief hidden behind composed expressions. For many priestesses, the role brought permanent change. The Pythia herself was required to be older and beyond the age of marriage and children. But attendants and subsidiary priestesses could be younger, and sometimes came from families that expected them to serve for a portion of their lives before returning home. Your path depends on the role you stepped into. If you were chosen as one of the younger attendants, family ties continued quietly in the background. You might see your parents during festivals, exchange simple offerings, stand beside them while the entire town gathered for processions. But if your destiny was to become the Pythia, the chief priestess, the voice of Apollo, your life shifted more dramatically. Pythias lived with strict boundaries. They remained unmarried or widowed. They lived apart from ordinary demands, so their minds stayed clear and their presence remained steady. Children, romantic life, and the everyday rhythm of a household were no longer part of their path. Still, family was not erased. They simply stood at a distance, honoring your role and recognizing the weight that came with it. You were seen as someone set apart, not because you were above others, but because your life now served a purpose older than any family line. Leaving home was not marked by celebration or ceremony. It was quiet. You packed simple garments. You took a small token, a woven band, a carved charm, a sprig of laurel, something to carry the memory of where you came from. When you reached the sanctuary, the change settled slowly. Your days structured by ritual, your thoughts shaped by new responsibilities. The presence of family softened into something like a gentle memory. Still there, still important, but no longer guiding your choices. In time, you understood the trade. The world you left behind made room for the world you were entering. A life rooted in service, in stillness, and in the long tradition of women who carried Apollo's presence into the mortal world. And as that understanding deepened, the separation from your old life no longer felt like loss. It became part of the path, a quiet threshold you crossed as you stepped fully into the role of a Delphic priestess. The sanctuary of Delphi becomes your world, a place shaped by centuries of devotion and by the careful hands of those who served before you. Each morning, as the sky lightens over Mount Parnassus, you step into a space that feels both sacred and awake. The air carries the scent of laurel burned during rituals, and the stones beneath your feet hold the warmth of generations who walked these paths long before you. The sanctuary is built in rising terraces. City-states from across the Greek world once competed to build treasuries here. Small temple-like structures where they stored their offerings to Apollo. You walk past them one by one. The treasury of the Athenians, the treasury of the Siphnians, their marble carvings softened by time, yet still telling stories of victories, heroes, and civic pride. Between these treasuries winds the sacred way, a sloping path paved with ancient stone, carrying pilgrims from the entrance toward the sanctuary's heart. Your footsteps fall lightly along it, echoing the thousands who once climbed this same road, the sound of water follows you. The Castalian spring flows nearby, cold and clear, falling from a fissure in the rock. Priestesses purified their hands here before entering the temple. Pilgrims washed themselves to prepare for the presence of the god. As you continue upward, the sanctuary grows quieter. The noise of visitors fades behind thick walls and tall colonnades. Your path rises toward the center, the Temple of Apollo. The temple stands on a broad platform with columns that catch the morning light. The structure you see now is the result of careful rebuilding after an earthquake destroyed the earlier one. Inside is the long central hall, the cellar, and beneath it lies the Aditon, the hidden chamber where the Pythia gives her prophecies. Few ever enter that space. Only the Pythia, certain priests, and a handful of senior attendants. Even from the upper hall, you can sense its gravity. A place where the ordinary world hesitates and something older settles in. Around the temple stand smaller altars, each with its own purpose and history. Some for daily offerings, some for festival rites, some placed by city-states seeking Apollo's protection before journeys or wars. Every structure here carries a story. Every terrace marks a layer of devotion, and every carved stone stands as evidence of how far people once traveled to ask their questions of the god. Your responsibilities bring you through these spaces each day, dusting altars, tending lamps, replacing wilted laurel with fresh branches, preparing grain for sacrifice, walking slowly through the sanctuary as if caring for a living presence. With time, you begin to feel the rhythm of the place, the calm that settles between the treasuries, the soft sound of water in the distance, the steady warmth of the stones under morning light. The sanctuary no longer feels large or overwhelming. It becomes familiar, ordered, a landscape that shapes your steps as naturally as the path you once took at home. By the time you finish your morning round, the sanctuary has already wrapped itself around your senses, quiet, structured, and ready for the rituals that guide your day. From your first days in Delphi, you learn that the sanctuary has a rhythm of its own. Not rigid, but steady. A quiet structure shaped over centuries to protect the accuracy of the oracle and the dignity of the priestesses who serve here. You're introduced to these customs gently, not through lectures, but by watching the older priestesses move. Their gestures slow and precise, their voices soft, never hurried. You begin to follow their lead long before anyone tells you the rules outright. Some expectations reveal themselves instantly. Before stepping into the Temple of Apollo, you wash your hands at the Castalian spring, not out of habit, but because the Greeks believed impurity could cloud the god's message. Even a small quarrel, a brush with illness, or contact with blood could keep someone from entering the temple until they performed a cleansing ritual. Other customs you learn by listening. The Pythia is older, always older. You hear why while tending laurel leaves with an elder priestess. Long ago, the oracle was a young woman, but after a visitor tried to abduct her, the sanctuary decided that only women past childbearing age could hold the role. It's one of the few rules that was born from a real fear. and it stayed unchanged for the rest of the oracle's history. Your own behavior is shaped by simpler boundaries. You move slowly within the sanctuary, because sudden gestures can draw attention or disrupt a ritual already in progress. You speak with measured calm, because careless words here can be mistaken for omens. Visitors travel from distant cities, Sparta, Athens, Thebes, and many of them arrive anxious, hopeful, or desperate for guidance. The sanctuary depends on your quiet steadiness to keep their expectations grounded. Even the food you eat feels intentional. Before long ritual days, you avoid heavy meals. Nothing that might bring dizziness or make your breath unsteady. Older priestesses explain it simply. Clarity of body leads to clarity of mind. The Pythia follows this even more strictly, chewing laurel leaves and drinking from the Cassotis spring before and entering the Aditon beneath the temple. Some boundaries surprise you. Pilgrims may thank you, but you don't offer personal advice. A single comment from a priestess could be mistaken for Apollo's will. So you keep your guidance limited to ritual steps, never to the choices that shape a pilgrim's life. Only the oracle speaks on the god's behalf. With time, these customs stop feeling like rules. They settle into your movements naturally, a way of carrying yourself that matches the stillness of the sanctuary. You understand now why the Greeks trusted Delphi for nearly 1,000 years. The order here isn't forced, it's protective. It creates a space where the world quiets just enough for people to hear something deeper than their own fears. By midday, the sanctuary feels balanced, its rituals steady, its atmosphere calm, its priestesses moving as gently as the mountain wind. And in that calmness, you begin to sense the rhythm of a life that belongs fully to this ancient place, guiding you toward the duties waiting in the day ahead. Your days in Delphi are shaped not only by ritual, but by the steady stream of people who arrive seeking Apollo's guidance. From early morning onward, the sanctuary feels like a gathering point for the ancient world. You begin your work in the shaded portico where pilgrims wait. Some come from nearby towns, others from distant coasts, carrying gifts wrapped in cloth, small bronze figures, olive branches, coins from cities you've only heard about in stories. You record their names on a wax tablet, listening carefully to accents that stretch across regions. A simple error, a misplaced syllable or mistaken city, could send a prophecy to the wrong person. So your handwriting is precise and steady. Once the names are noted, you guide pilgrims to the chamber, where priests quietly assess their intentions. In Delphi, motives mattered. Questions asked out of anger or deceit were believed to fall outside Apollo's interest. You listen as people speak, some hopeful, some frightened, some carrying questions meant only for the oracle. When the priests approve the petitions, you prepare the ritual items needed for the session. Barley for the sacrificial goat, fresh laurel for the Pythia, clean water drawn from the Cassotis spring, each object placed carefully, following a pattern unchanged for centuries. Later, you help test the goat for the day's prophecy. If it shivers at the touch of cold water, the sign is good. a signal that the god is present and the oracle may proceed. If it does not, the sanctuary postpones divination until the proper signs return. When the Pythia descends to the Aditon, your role becomes one of quiet transmission. You stand outside the chamber, close enough to hear fragments of her words, and carry them to the priests who will shape the responses into verses for the waiting pilgrims. By late afternoon, your duties shift to closing the day. You write brief notes for temple records: who visited, what offerings arrived, which priests were present. These tablets matter more than they appear. Future envoys look to them to understand how the oracle once responded to similar questions long ago. As the sun dips behind the ridge, the sanctuary softens into evening. Visitors have gone, and the stone terraces cool under the mountain breeze. You store the tablets, extinguish the last lamps, and step out into the quiet that follows a full day. The work ends without ceremony, simple and complete, and you return to your chamber, carrying the calm that settles over Delphi at dusk. The deeper work of the sanctuary unfolds in a place few people ever see. You reach it through a quiet passage beneath the Temple of Apollo, a narrow hallway where the air cools and the sounds of the sanctuary fade into a soft, steady echo. This is the route the priestesses take to reach the Aditon, the innermost room where the oracle speaks. The chamber itself is small compared to the grand hall above. Not a cavern, not a dramatic pit, but a modest stone room built exactly where the ancient Greeks believed Apollo's presence touched the earth most clearly. You stand at the threshold, watching the Pythia take her place. She sits on a bronze tripod, its legs engraved with patterns that date back to the early centuries of the sanctuary. A shallow bowl of water rests beside her, drawn from the Casotis spring that once flowed directly beneath the temple. Priestesses believed this water helped connect her mind to the clarity of the god. A fresh branch of laurel rests in her hand, not decorative, but essential. Laurel was Apollo's sacred symbol, and its scent was believed to steady the body during the long hours the oracle sometimes endured. The chamber holds no swirling vapors, no theatrical fog. Historical accounts are far quieter. The air is still. The space is simple. The power comes from the ritual itself. The rhythmic prayers, the steady presence of the Pythia, and the belief shared by countless generations that Apollo spoke through this room. Before the first petitioner enters the temple above, the Pythia closes her eyes and touches the cool water with her fingertips. The priests stand nearby, listening for the subtle shift in her breathing that signals she is ready. You've witnessed this moment before, the calm before the questions begin. The Pythia's voice starts softly, almost a whisper, then steadies into clear phrases spoken in a tone unlike her everyday speech. Some days her messages come quickly, other days they emerge slowly, shaped by pauses as she listens for meaning. You do not interpret her words. That task belongs to the priests. Your role is to listen closely and memorize what you hear, so nothing is lost between the chamber and the world waiting above. Each prophecy feels different. Some carry reassurance. Some bring warnings. Some are cryptic, like riddles that must be lived before they are understood. The Greeks believed the oracle spoke truth, but rarely in straight lines. While she speaks, your attention sharpens. The small chamber amplifies every sound. The faint scrape of her sandals, the catch in her breath, the rustle of laurel leaves as she shifts her grip. Despite the weight of the moment, the chamber remains calm. There is no frenzy, no chaos, just a steady ritual performed in the same space for almost 1,000 years. When the final words leave the Pythia's lips, she grows quiet, and the room returns to stillness. A priest steps forward to help her rise slowly from the tripod. You extinguish the ritual lamp, a simple flame that marked the session's beginning, and guide the remaining items back into storage. The Aditon empties, but the silence it leaves behind feels full, as if the chamber continues to hold everything spoken within its walls. When you step back into the temple's upper hall, the shift in light and air feels almost new, a reminder that the heart of the oracle beats in a room few will ever enter, yet shapes decisions across the ancient world. The day of prophecy begins long before the first pilgrim enters the temple. You can feel it in the air, a quiet tension settling over the terraces, as though the mountain prepares itself for what is about to unfold. From your place near the inner hall, you hear the low murmur of voices gathering outside. They come from all corners of the Greek world, envoys with sealed tablets, families carrying simple gifts, soldiers hoping for reassurance, and travelers who walked for days just to stand in this line. When the priests declare the signs favorable, the process begins. A petitioner steps forward, holding a small offering. Laurel, honey, a coin marked with a city emblem. You accept it and guide him toward the threshold, where the air grows cooler and the scents of oil and laurel blend in a quiet haze. Light filters through the roof beams in narrow bands that shift slowly across the floor. Beneath that floor, the Pythia waits in the Aditon, her presence unseen, her voice the center of everything that will follow. The priests speak the formal question aloud. The petitioner bows his head. The temple grows completely still. A stillness so deep you can hear the faint click of a stylus as another assistant prepares a tablet for recording. Then the Pythia begins. Her voice rises in fragments from the chamber below, sometimes clear, sometimes wavering, sometimes broken into phrases you must piece together carefully. No dramatics, no frenzy, just the steady cadence of a woman who has done this for many years. You listen closely. Every sound matters. A single misplaced word could alter the meaning of a prophecy. So you repeat each phrase silently to yourself until you are certain you have captured it. The priests above you craft her words into hexameter verse, not to make them poetic, but to make them memorable. Verses carry across distance, easier for envoys to repeat when they return home. The petitioner receives the answer with the solemnity of someone who understands its weight. Some leave relieved, some thoughtful, some uncertain. Prophecies are rarely direct, and Delphi never claimed to provide easy choices. The next in line steps forward, and the rhythm continues for hours. Questions about harvests, voyages, inheritance, treaties, illness, and sometimes the quiet, personal worries no one else hears. By late afternoon, the Pythia's voice softens. The priests close the session, and the last petitioner steps away from the temple with his answer held carefully in hand. Inside, the hall grows still again. The echoes fade, the air cools, and the space returns to its usual calm. You gather your notes, set aside the ritual tools, and step out into the early evening. A simple, gentle close to a day shaped by questions, ritual, and the steady work of listening. Festival days in Delphi feel different the moment you wake. The air carries a kind of brightness, as if the mountain itself knows the sanctuary will soon be filled with music, crowds, and the movement of people who arrived days ago to honor Apollo. You step outside your chamber and see the first signs of preparation unfolding along the terraces. Merchants setting up small stalls, musicians tuning their lyres, young athletes stretching in the cold morning air, runners, wrestlers, charioteers who travelled here for the Pythian Games, the second most important festival in Greece after the Olympics. The Games began centuries before your lifetime, originally as a musical contest held in Apollo's honour to celebrate his victory over the serpent Python. Now, they include athletic competitions as well: foot races, discus, long jump, and chariot races that take place in the stadium high on the slope above the sanctuary. Your role on festival days is lighter, but no less meaningful. You help prepare the processional route, laying fresh laurel along the sacred way, lighting small oil lamps near the treasuries, and assisting priests as they ready the main altar for the public sacrifice. The smell of roasting meat, the sound of chanting, and the steady beat of the hymn dedicated to Apollo blend into a rhythm that fills the entire sanctuary. By midday, the crowd surges, envoys in fine cloaks, families carrying woven baskets of food, travellers leading small children by the hand. Some come for the games, others for the music, and some simply to be part of the great festival that happens only once every 4 years. From your position near the temple entrance, you can hear the competitions in the distance, the roar of spectators in the stadium when a runner crosses the finish line, or the deep, rhythmic chant that accompanies a performance on the kithara, a grand stringed instrument favoured by Apollo himself. Musical contests hold special meaning. Winners are honoured not for strength, but for mastery of harmony and memory, qualities the Greeks believed reflected the orderliness of the gods. Some musicians rehearse in the sanctuary courtyard before ascending to the performance hall, their melodies drifting through the colonnades in soft, bright phrases that linger long after they leave. You have duties during these competitions too. Priestesses observe the offerings brought by victors, recording donations of bronze, fine cloth, or carved figurines given in thanks for skill, fortune, or a moment of unexpected triumph. What you notice most on festival days is how alive Delphi becomes. The sanctuary is usually a place of calm ritual, measured steps, and quiet voices. But during the festival, the entire sacred way hums with movement. Crowds flowing like water between treasuries and altars, as music rises from one terrace and fades on another. As evening approaches, the celebrations shift. Athletes crowned with laurel wreaths walk proudly through the sanctuary. Musicians gather in small groups, repeating pieces they played earlier in the day. Families settle along the steps to share food under the fading light. From your place near the temple, you experience the festival differently. Not as a spectator, but as someone who keeps the sacred spaces steady while the world gathers around them. Even in the noise and activity, the heart of the sanctuary remains calm. When the final hymn is sung and the crowds begin to disperse, the quiet returns slowly. The lamps burn lower, the terraces empty, and Delphi settles back into the stillness you know well. On nights like this, you walk the sacred way with the faint echo of music still in the air, aware that the sanctuary has given joy to thousands. And tomorrow, it will return to its quieter rhythm once more. For all the hours you spend in the sanctuary, there are moments when you step beyond its gates and remember that Delphi is more than altars and rituals. It is a living town, a place with families, workshops, markets, and the everyday sounds of life woven into the mountain slope. The first thing you notice outside the temple walls is the change in pace. Inside the sanctuary, movements are slow, measured, guided by custom. Outside, the world feels freer. Voices rising from the lower streets, children racing down stone paths, and the steady rhythm of artisans hammering bronze in open workshops. Most of the townspeople know the priestesses by sight. They nod respectfully as you pass, but they don't stare or whisper. To them, you're part of the landscape, a familiar figure who moves through the town with quiet purpose. On some days, you walk to the small marketplace where stalls are arranged along a narrow terrace. Fishermen bring dried fish from distant ports. Farmers bring olives, figs, and the first clusters of grapes in late summer. You rarely shop for yourself. The sanctuary provides most of your needs, but you often visit to watch the exchange of stories between travelers and locals. It's here that you hear news long before official envoys arrive at the temple. Rumors of distant conflicts, whispers of new colonies forming across the sea, tales of strange storms or surprising harvests. Delphi, for all its quiet height, is never cut off from the world. Information flows uphill, just as pilgrims do. Sometimes you visit the homes of families who serve the sanctuary, stone houses with low roofs and small courtyards shaded by fig trees. They offer you simple hospitality, a seat near the fire, a cup of watered wine, fresh bread still warm from the oven. Conversations stay gentle and never pry into temple matters. People in Delphi understand boundaries. They live beside the sanctuary, not inside it. From these terraces, the view stretches far across the valley. Olive groves shimmer like silver ribbons. and the long road leading to the sea glows pale under the afternoon sun. On quiet days, you stand here longer than you mean to, watching shepherds move their flocks along distant ridges, or farmers guiding oxen through narrow fields. Even with the freedom of these moments, you feel the boundary of your role like a soft, invisible line. You don't linger in taverns. You don't join the dances held during local festivals. Your life is linked to the sanctuary, and the town respects that distance without needing it explained. By the time you walk back up the mountain path, the sound of the town fades behind you. The clatter of pottery, the laughter of children, the low hum of conversation drifting from doorways. Then the sanctuary walls come into view, quiet and familiar, as if waiting patiently for your return. Crossing back inside feels like stepping between worlds, one filled with daily life, the other with ancient duty, and you move between them with the steady balance that defines your place in Delphi. You learn early in your service that the sanctuary's power doesn't rest solely in its rituals. It also lives in the objects carefully preserved and tended by the priestesses of Delphi, items that carry meaning layered over generations of belief. The one you handle most often is the laurel. Branches cut from the sacred grove just below the sanctuary are brought up at dawn, their leaves still cool with morning dew. Apollo claimed the laurel after pursuing the nymph Daphne, and ever since, its scent has been tied to clarity, prophecy, and purification. You lay fresh sprigs beside the altars, and on divination days, the Pythia holds a small branch in her hand as she speaks. Another object you come to know well is the omphalos, the navel stone kept within the temple. To the Greeks, it marked the center of the world, the place where Zeus's two eagles met in flight after being released from opposite ends of the earth. The stone is carved with a net-like pattern, and when you first touch its cool surface during training, you feel the weight of standing beside a symbol that anchored the cosmology of an entire civilization. In the storage rooms behind the temple's main hall, you also care for the ceremonial tripods. Some are simple bronze, others are elaborate gifts from powerful city-states. The tripod is Apollo's emblem, a reminder of the early days when priestesses gave prophecies while seated above the sacred ground. Each tripod is polished with care, because even the smallest blemish feels out of place in a sanctuary where order matters. You often assist with the incense bowls as well. Delphi does not use a single scent. Different resins serve different purposes. Frankincense for purity, myrrh for solemn offerings, and storax for ceremonies meant to quiet the mind. When you heat the first grains over a small coal, the fragrant smoke rises slowly, curling through the colonnades and settling the air before visitors arrive. Then there is the kotelos, a shallow bowl used during the early stages of sacrifice. It may seem simple, but it must always be clean, always smooth, and always placed precisely on the altar's right side. You learn these small rules not as restrictions, but as part of a choreography that has lasted centuries. Some objects carry stories that surprise even the priestesses. A golden statue of Apollo stands within the inner hall, said to have been fashioned from the melted offerings of several Greek cities after a great conflict. Visitors never see you tend it. Only priestesses may dust the folds of its cloak or polish the delicate lines of the god's lyre. There are simpler symbols too, stone votives shaped like feet or hands left by pilgrims who sought healing, tiny terracotta animals offered in thanks for protection of a family's livestock, and tall bronze stands inscribed with the names of victors from long-forgotten festivals. Handling these objects becomes part of your daily rhythm. You feel their weight, their purpose, their history. Not one is random, not one is without meaning. They form a quiet language inside the sanctuary, a language of devotion, memory, and tradition that stretches back many lifetimes. By the time the last chest is closed, the hall has already grown quiet again. You take one final look at the objects under your care, the laurel, the tripods, the carved stones, each resting in its place with a calm familiarity. Then you step out into the fading light, carrying with you the quiet satisfaction of tending to things that have shaped this sanctuary for generations. Serving in Delphi places you close to the decisions of rulers and cities, even if you never speak to them directly. Their questions pass through your hands, their offerings through your records, and their outcomes through the stories that circulate quietly among the priestesses. The first you learn about is Croesus of Lydia, a king known across the world for his wealth. He asked whether attacking Persia would lead to victory. The oracle replied that a great empire would fall. Croesus assumed it meant Persia. The empire that fell was his own. Priestesses repeat this story as a reminder that prophecy is exact, but interpretation rarely is. Another story involves Athens in the days before the Persian invasion. The city asked how it could survive. The oracle spoke of a wooden wall. Some believed this meant the old palisade on the Acropolis. Themistocles argued instead that the wall referred to Athens' navy. The city followed his view, and the Greek fleet won a decisive battle at Salamis. This interpretation shaped the future of the region. You also hear about the foundations of colonies. A group from Thera once asked the oracle where they should settle. They were told to travel to North Africa. They obeyed, and the colony of Cyrene grew into a prosperous city that influenced trade for centuries. Another recurring account tells of Lycurgus, the Spartan lawgiver. He is said to have asked the oracle for guidance while reshaping Spartan law. The resulting constitution became one of the most stable systems in Greece, and its authority was partly anchored in Delphi's approval. There are military stories as well. Philip of Macedon once received a prophecy that he would win every battle except one. The uncertainty of that single exception followed him throughout his campaigns and shaped his caution even at the height of his power. Some stories are quieter, but no less significant. Cities asking whether to plant new crops, establish trade routes, or form alliances. Over decades, these small decisions shaped borders, economies, and the movement of entire populations. By the end of the day, the stories settle into memory alongside your other duties. They become part of the quiet knowledge every priestess carries. Records of decisions made far beyond Delphi, but shaped in small and steady ways by the words spoken inside the sanctuary. Night settles over Delphi slowly. The sun slips behind the ridge, and the long terraces of the sanctuary take on a muted, quiet tone as the last traces of daylight fade. Your final tasks for the evening are practical ones. You check the lamps inside the temple hall, making sure only the ones needed for night watch remain lit. You close the smaller shrine doors, securing the spaces where ritual items are stored. The priests finish their rounds as well, exchanging brief words before retreating to their quarters. The sanctuary grows still. In a way it never achieves during the day. No footsteps along the sacred way, no low voices at the portico, no movement from visitors who usually linger with questions or offerings. The quiet allows you to notice details that vanish in busier hours. The faint echo of your own steps, the coolness rising from the stone floor, and the steady flicker of a single oil lamp casting a soft glow along the wall. You sometimes step outside the temple before returning to your chamber. The night air is cooler here, carrying the scent of earth and pine down from the higher slopes. The sky looks wide and clear, the stars bright in a way that feels sharper at this altitude. From this height, the valley below appears darker and still, with only a few scattered lights marking small farms and distant homes. Other priestesses pass you on their way to finish their own tasks. They move quietly, their footsteps soft on the stone. The day's pace has ended, and the sanctuary adopts a slower rhythm that feels steady and familiar. When you reach your chamber, you set aside your sandals, fold your garments for the morning, and sit for a moment before lying down to rest. The walls are simple: smoothed stone, a small niche for a lamp, a wooden chest for your personal belongings. The room doesn't hold much, but it keeps the night air calm and the world outside a comfortable distance away. The faint sounds you hear are always the same and always comforting. A soft gust of wind against the temple roof, the occasional call of an owl, and the quiet tap of a late travelling pilgrim finding shelter near the outer gate. You settle into the blankets and let your breathing slow. The work of the day is finished, and the sanctuary rests with you. Night in Delphi carries its own kind of stillness, not ceremonial, not symbolic, just a calm pause before the next morning begins. Thank you for spending this time here tonight. You've listened, you've wandered through a different world for a while, and now you don't need to do anything else. Just let yourself settle. Let your shoulders loosen a bit. Let the day drift further away. You don't have to think about Delphi anymore, or hold on to any part of the story. It's enough that you were here and allowed your mind to slow down for a little while. As you close your eyes, you can let the quieter pace of this story stay with you. Let the calm you felt carry you into sleep smoothly, without effort. Good night, friend. I hope you drift off easily and wake tomorrow feeling a little lighter.